Hello, 2020 audience. Welcome to the 2020 series presented by the New York Film Academy. The 2020 series are conversations with amazing creative visionaries about craft, creativity, and collaboration. And I'm Liz Hinlein, the creative director at New York Film Academy and filmmaker. And we are going to do 20 minutes of conversation, talking all about craft and action and working with DPs and all interesting stuff like that. And then we're going to take 20 minutes of questions from you, the global audience. So jump in, write in your questions. Today I have an amazing director who I so admire and so respect, Marcos Siega. Hey, Marcos.
Hey, Liz, how are you?
Great. So Marcos, you've been directing for a long time. You've done music videos, commercials, TV, features. Just off the bat, what makes a good director from your point of view?
Wow, what makes a good director? Good directors are great storytellers and good communicators, being able to articulate a vision. On the technical side, I think that makes a good director, but at the heart of it is just a good storyteller, someone who can understand the human condition, how to get performances out of people and put a story together.
Would you say if you're like a visionary but not a great collaborator, like a good artist but maybe not so verbal, is that a challenge for a director?
I would think so. I mean, I know that certainly I'd have a hard time with that. And I get to work with a lot of directors in my current position as a producer director. So you don't really see a lot of that. You don't really see a lot of directors who can't communicate in that way. But I'd imagine that maybe in features you have people who are sort of more inside their head and might be that way. But I think it's an important quality, the communication part of it, being able to get that vision out, getting your team, getting the people around you to help execute your vision.
And where, like, when you get a script for a show, that where are you getting your vision? Where does that start from? Do you do research? How do you sort of dive in deeply?
Well, are you talking as a guest director or as a pilot director or feature director, commercial director? Because I think, I approach every single one of those differently, and you sort of have to. So, as a TV director, it's really hard because I had a great mentor going into television, Paris Barkley, and he said to me when I was shadowing him before I had ever directed TV, he said, the problem with television episodic directing is you don't get to choose your script. And you might love a TV show and pursue a show, but then you get there and you might get a clunker of a script. They may be late on it, and you don't get to develop it. You don't get to work on it. So he was like, the most important thing is you have to fall in love with it. Fall in love with every script you get, no matter how bad it is. And if you can't fall in love with it scene by scene. And, the only way to prepare for episodic directing is just to know the show, to do your homework, know what the language of the show is, what the expectations are, how they play scenes out. And you don't want to show up and start reinventing the wheel, because it just slows everything down. They're not really looking for that out of a director.
What are they looking for, from your opinion, out of a, let's say, guest TV director?
You're looking for someone who's going to take the material within the language, and that's easier said than done, because you get these scripts, they're writing them a million miles an hour. It's very, very rare, only in the highest end of the spectrum do they have scripts in advance. So you're showing up, and the writers are even still working on it. So elevating the material, just finding a way to pull something out of it that wasn't there on the page, emotionally, action-wise. But again, then you're also playing within their little sandbox. You have to know the language. There are shows that say no Steadicam or no handheld. So you got to go in knowing exactly what it is the expectations are.
And then where do you find your edge to exceed that? Like, where do you sort of push the envelope a little bit?
I break it down by scene, and you know, if you're doing something that has a lot of just talking scenes with exposition, whether it's a procedural or even just a big drama, and you find, you know, you have a couple of dinner scenes that is just pages and pages of dialogue, I'll look for, obviously, you know, whose point of view am I in? What's the story I'm trying to tell here? And then try to design the shots around making sure that that lands and making sure that that works on an emotional level or a visceral level, depending on what the scene is. So I break it down, and every scene means something. So I just look at, what does that scene mean? What are we trying to do? And how do I make that as good as I can make it? And sometimes it's a camera move, sometimes it's blocking, and sometimes it's just performance, and you have to massage performance to get there.
And you know, you were saying something when we talked earlier, which I really value. You said you can't make a living off of just making things look cool. And obviously coming out of, and you did so many seminal, very cool looking, really interesting music videos. Where did you learn that, and how did you sort of pivot from I guess, you know, more the surface of videos to some of the deeper, more complex, dramatic relationships that happen in narrative?
I think that comes out of your like who you are as a person. I've always been a very visual person. I don't look back at my music videos and think of them as particularly visual. They were, you know, concept videos and narrative videos, performance videos, but I wasn't the guy making like just really cool, beautiful, fashion-y style music videos. There was a whole class of directors doing that at the time. I think my roots, because they're more in performance and theater, and growing up in New York, that's sort of what I fell in love with to start with. I never put a lot of emphasis on the purely visual aesthetic. Visual was always a way to enhance performance or enhance the emotional content. There are directors who make a great living out of visual style, but those are a specific kind of movie, right? Those directors tend, there are some auteurs out there who do both that I think are masters at what they do. I work really hard on the visual side, and the emotional performance side comes a little bit easier for me. So I lean into that. Did I answer your question? I'm not even sure I answered your question.
That was a really good answer to the question, because I have like 40 questions on that. But what I do want to share is what I also really value is when you told me that Nora Ephron was your first mentor.
Well, yes,
and what you learned from, because that is so neat, especially for a guy who's directing Weezer and, you know, like an action.
So I was leaving, honestly, I was leaving that part out because I sort of lead it with, I didn't go to film school. And, you know, this is New York Film Academy. So I always wanted to be a filmmaker. I couldn't afford film school. I was in a band, and I met somebody who was working for Nora Ephron. I got to know her. I ended up working for her, and she's married to Nick Pileggi, who wrote Goodfellas and Casino. And for a number of years, I lived in a guest room there, and that was my writer. Everything she did, and my education in my sort of early film education came from, again, my own looking at theater, that experience, and then working with Nora and seeing how she approached things. And she always approached on the page. She never thought about, she didn't start with like, how cool can we make this look? So having that influence, I think, certainly is a big part of why I approach things the way I approach things.
Yeah, I mean, because your work, it is to me, when I look at it, it's super visual, but also it's really deep and complex and is all about story. It's never this superfluous, like, cool gag just to have the cool gag. There's usually a payoff somewhere with that. Um, I remember when I was shadowing you on You, and like it was so designed, how you designed all the sequences in that um, uh, with the two characters, and there was a hide and seek in a big mansion, and it was very intricate the way each shot had to build on each other. And we talked about, because on the day you had no notes and it seemed like you were just like mad genius pulling it out. But you tell me that you do, you know, a lot of prep to get to that point.
Yeah, I do. I do a lot of prep work, and something like that was that episode was very complicated. We had, not just story-wise was it complicated, because the script required particular locations where Joe could be watching Beck. And in the script, it was, he was in an attic looking at her through air conditioner vents. And, you know, you can't just go and find that perfect house that has everything. So we were reimagining everything as we were scouting, and it was a puzzle. And on top of that, we had a lot of makeup that we had to do. So I had to work with a double, and then with pen, and shoot things. Like I would shoot the same, you were there, I'd shoot the same scene twice, once with the double, and then a couple of days later I'd have to do it with pen. It was also an episode where he was doing press, so we didn't have him all the time. I did a lot of prep work designing that. I don't like to hand that out, and I think I have a little bit of you know, what's the syndrome, like you know, post-traumatic stress from when I used to do commercials, and I would hand the client a very detailed shot list, and then you'd be on set and they expect you to follow this roadmap, which to me is the first time I shoot it. It's at my desk, and I sort of get down on paper exactly what I want it to be. And in the ad world, they sort of expect, they want to know exactly what you're going to do. And I lost a little bit of the jazz, you know, you show where you can show up and say, this is going to be better, I want to do it this way, because they're just crossing off your shots on a list. So when I started doing television, I was like, look, I prep, I do a very detailed shot list for me. I don't carry it with me, because by the time I show up on set, I know what it is. I have my notes in my script, and they're in my own little shorthand. And my ADs know that. During prep, I communicate all of my intentions to everyone that needs to know. So there's not a lot of questions when you get there. I do tend to very clearly explain to everyone again on the day, go over it. But I like the freedom of looking at my shot list and then how can I make it better? Because, you know, sitting at a desk is different than being in a room. But I also have the experience of shooting my own stuff. So I know that if I decide to turn around and look that way, I'm boning everybody, and I'm going to have to compromise. So that's an important aspect of the prep, is understanding, again, if you're going to change something, what's the domino effect going to be, especially when you're doing television, because you're operating at 100 miles an hour.
And what is, just out of curiosity, what is your prep look like?
My prep, pretty boring. I mean, I read the script once to read it, actually sometimes twice just to read it and kind of get the story in me. I will then break it down by scene in my script, give myself, I ask a lot of questions in my notes to myself. Point of view am I in? And when I talk to the writer, the showrunner, those questions are the first thing I want to tackle. I want to understand, make sure we're all on the same page. So my prep is a lot of that. It's just sort of figuring out, what is the story we're telling? What do I want to land? And within that, I'm designing shots. I'm figuring out how I'm going to visually elevate it. On You, that is a good example. There was a sequence that I love when you do something and it's very rare that you're like, that worked exactly as I imagined it working. But there was a sequence that was tough to pull off. It was Joe watching Peach, who was watching Beck, and they're in this house, and we couldn't find the right location. So I built a bathtub into a small bathroom across from a doorway. You design all these things on paper and at the location, hoping that it's all going to work. And when it works, it's a great payoff. But my prep is a lot of that. It's just kind of trying to figure out, like, what am I going to do here that's going to elevate it? What are the shots that are going to make this really cool? If I turn the sound off, are you going to be feeling what I want you to feel? So it's just sitting down and going through shot by shot.
That's great. And, you know, and it reminds me, it's like the best way to watch, to learn, is to turn the sound off of anything, because the sound is so guiding, and to really understand how a scene is broken down. Yeah. When you are doing, you know, world building in like a pilot, say Wonder Woman, I mean, not one, Batwoman, not
Batwoman.
Batwoman, which is, you know, when I saw it, it's such a huge show, and it looks so big and lush. How do you, as a pilot director, even start approaching that?
Batwoman's sort of the exception for me personally, because I put into that, I got that job when the director had to bail. So the sort of train had left the station. They had cast it. They were already in prep, and then I came in and had to take over. I didn't take over somebody else's vision. They still gave me control. But it's a little bit different than when I get a script and then want to build a world and bring it to life. It depends on what it is. If it's a thriller, I lean into my favorite thrillers. I think about, like, what are the movies that worked and inspired me? You know, I think by nature, as filmmakers and storytellers, we're sort of always looking to classics and, you know, what works, what made me feel something. You then try to give it your own little twist. Batwoman was also, you know, it lives in that DC universe with Arrow and the Flash and everyone else, and I wanted it to feel a little different than those. It ends up, once it goes through, I call it the network TV meat grinder. Once your footage goes through that meat grinder, it kind of all comes out the other end looking the same, but you go in with a very specific idea and vision. So for example, in Batwoman, I was like, she doesn't have these superpowers in the way that Supergirl does, or the Flash, or she's a human who, her suit is like Batman. Her suit is what gives her her abilities, and she's super smart. So I wanted the action to be more grounded. So I looked at movies that had a more grounded action sequences for inspiration. And then emotionally, it's hard because there was a lot of emotion and story on the page. Unfortunately, when you go to get it down to 42 minutes, that's what I mean by the meat grinder. All this amazing stuff that was written, all these really great performances that you hope you got, all get kind of truncated into these 42 minutes of TV. And that's where it starts to feel all samey. But I think you have to sort of go for the big and then worry about that later.
When you're in the world building stage in any of your pilots, is that like, and you come up with some ideas, is that like a sell, or is it like,
oh, for sure.
Where does that, because you're out maybe presenting ideas that the showrunner or other people didn't think about, and how do you navigate that?
Well, if it's a competitive situation where I get a script and I really love it, and I'm like, this is a pilot I want to go do. I go in just like everyone else, and it's an interview process. And that interview process for directors on pilots is, what is your vision? And it's usually a presentation board of some kind, sometimes, and if you can cut something together with existing footage just to give them a flavor of what it is. So that's getting the job is a little bit of a performance, right? You want to make sure everyone really understands what you're selling, what you're trying to accomplish, because then you don't want to show up and start doing things and you're like, what the hell is this, right? So it's hard. I get really anxious when I'm trying to build a world and sell an idea, because the showrunner, you don't get a chance to speak to them in advance, and they tell you, hey, we're thinking the show should look like this. They really want to hear what your vision is, and it's a shot in the dark in a way, because it could be a 180 from what they're hoping to get, and you walk out of there and you don't get the job. I just go with my gut, my conviction, and try to communicate exactly what it is I want.
And, you know, we were talking about, like, especially with Batwoman, there's, you know, how do you were designing the fighting to be just more real, basically, and have a more realistic flavor. How do you work with the fight choreographer? And I know you prepared some stuff to show us, which is great, about what your process is to make the fighting sing, basically.
Well, going back to just to give you the steps there with Batwoman, because it's this world of other shows and they have a crossover, there is an expectation that everything sort of lives in the same space. And when I came with this idea of I didn't want wire rigs where she you know, if she hit somebody, that they would go flying out of frame, because she doesn't have that superpower. I wanted the fighting to be a little more grounded. There are moments where, you know, she has a grapple gun, she shoots it and she gets flown out of frame, but that's a moment. But as a fight sequence, I went to the stunt coordinator who was doing all the other, you know, superhero shows up there and working on them, and he's great. And said, look, let's try, and I showed him a couple of references. I showed him the girl with the dragon tattoo and some sequences in Atomic Blonde that I thought had a more grounded feel to them. And we just kind of worked from there. So I took what was on the page, and it's usually, action sequences are usually just, you know, a couple of lines. What's key is trying to find what is the emotional moment in an action sequence, because just action for the sake of action, and that happens a lot in these TV scripts, usually somehow just gets cut down to nothing, because you're trying to cram the story into 42 minutes. You want everything to mean something. So with Batwoman, Caroline did a really good job of in episode 2, for example, instead of having Batwoman be told that her suit was bulletproof, she put the moment of realization that it was bulletproof into the action sequence. And that gave me something to anchor the action in, right? So I was like, I want to get to this moment where she gets shot and nothing happens, and she has a beat to realize, holy shit, I'm bulletproof, right?
I remember that, and it's a great character moment.
Yeah, but that little thing is a testament to Caroline's writing, and it's what I'm always looking for in an action sequence. I put together, I have the storyboards from that, so I can show you that, and then show you, after the storyboards, what I do is go to my stunt coordinator and say, this is what I'm hoping to get. He is usually on the location scout with me as I'm thinking about what I want it to be. I do the boards, then I give it to him, and I try to do this with enough time so that he can go back to the location with his stunt guys, and we cut it together to see how it works. So I have the storyboards, and then I have the little action sequence. Do you want me to pull that up?
Oh, that'd be amazing. We'd love to see it.
All right, let's see if I can do this. Screen share. Oh, hang on. I'm already doing it wrong. You're seeing the wrong thing. Hang on. Okay, now screen share. You seeing storyboards?
Storyboards, yes.
All right. So, I mean, I'm not going to belabor this, but the sequence was these rabbits who are the henchmen for our big bad Alice steal one of the Crow's trucks. They dump it in an alley. They light it on fire and start running away from it. And then out of nowhere in this alley, Batwoman, and it's the first time you see her in her bat suit, appears. So I wanted that moment to be a moment. And then she gets into a quick little fight. She gets knocked down. Guy tackles her. One guy runs off. The other guy shoots her. She realizes her thing is bulletproof. They end up running away from her. She throws her grapple at the guy. All these beats are written in the script, and then you just kind of try to, omit what doesn't work and add some flavor. And it's not like it's not a full sort of playbook that you're given in the script. It's just the idea of what they want the beats to be. I'm not going to sit through all these, but you can get a look at the boards and then quickly watch what my stunt coordinator did. This is an example of the storyboards and the sequence actually ended up being pretty spot on. There's always editorially some movement, but after, you can, if anybody's interested, they can go watch episode 2, and it's the second and third scene in the episode.
And what would you say would be the flavor that you added to this?
What would be the flavor? Well, this was the, again, because this had 2 moments in it, sort of seeing her for the first time, and then she's realizing she's bulletproof. And then at the end, what I'm not sure if it's on here actually, it's like she has that superhero landing because she jumps down from a rooftop and lands on a dumpster. It's this frame right here, I think. I can't even see my own thing. This frame. But it's there was not a lot of leeway to really add anything except establish the grounded aspect of the fighting. There wasn't a lot of fighting. This was a lot of chasing and her throwing her batarang and then grappling out of the scene at the end. So again, it's really just presentational. I had an objective here to make sure that I gave the audience a really big heroic introduction to Batwoman in her suit for the first time.
Cool.
Are you seeing the video screen?
No, I'm still seeing the boards.
Okay, so I got to go out.
Yeah, exactly. That's super cool.
All right, and I will share this. It's 1 minute and 30 seconds long. You want me just to play it?
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
Okay. So again, this is shot on my stunt. He put the music to it. He tries to dress it up a bit.
We had a little freezing action.
Where's Alice?
All right, so there's the iPhone previs, and not every stunt coordinator does that, but Marshall, who did it for Batwoman, it was the first time, so he everything we did on the show, he took his time to do that. And then I get to see sort of okay, these are the camera angles. This is what's in my storyboard. How can I improve on that? If you watch it in the episode, you know, there are other shots I've added in just to give it a little bit more of a flair. It's your lens choices in terms of the scope and making it a bit more cinematic, but those are the bones of it, right? So, and it's a really good just way to understand exactly what you need. The biggest issue is you're shooting that that previs was done during the day, but we're shooting it in the middle of the night, you know, so your call time is 8 p.m. and you got to wrap by 4 a.m. or 5 a.m. before the sun comes up. It's not a lot of time. Mm-hmm. So it's having it laid out that way. And then you got to make it look great. Again, that's not lit, so it doesn't look very good, but the show itself looks pretty amazing. It's time consuming.
I thought it looked really hot, and the amount of angles and action that was happening was impressive as a one day.
Yeah, well, it's all prep. It's you know, it's the conversation, and then I sit down and figure out. And remember, your script it'll say alleyway, mm-hmm. and then it has all these beats, and I needed to find an alley where they could run away from an exploding truck, where the guys could be getting away, and then she appears, and then they can get away from her again, so they have to turn corners. So we're cheating a bunch of locations to make it work. You just don't see the edits of where we're cheating it, but you know, we're in some big warehouse place, and we're moving. Okay, we're going to start this sequence here. When you turn this corner, we're not going to turn the corner. We're going to go over there and cheat it. So it's just all planning, but the amount of shots kind of takes care of itself if you know exactly what you need to do. And then, you know, these are 2-camera shows. We don't have the luxury of like adding cameras all the time, mm-hmm. like you would in a feature, but the more you sort of know exactly what you want, the easier it is.
And yeah, that looked great. And obviously the music and the whole thing led it a lot. Let's go to, there's a bunch of questions here, so I'm just going to pull one out. Denver asked, what is your favorite part of creating, he says a film, but it could be a pilot as well. What do you dread the most as well?
Well, my favorite part is what can I get out of the audience? You know, what's that reaction? So if it's when I did a lot of comedy commercials, and then I've obviously done a lot of scary sort of thriller type projects, and it's, you know, can I scare someone? I remember when I was doing The Following, I was most excited about on the page, Kevin Williamson wrote this really terrifying show, and I was like, how can I make that work? The script it had some great writing, great dialogue, but in the moments where you're meant to feel that, you know, it's that thing, don't go in the basement, what are you doing? Why are you going in the basement? My favorite part is getting the audience to feel something. So whether it's getting them to cry, or getting them to smile, or getting them to cover their eyes, that's your responsibility. That's the part that I enjoy the most. And when you're doing it, you don't always know that you're getting it, because, you know, it's you don't have the music, it's not cut together the right way, and there's you need the confidence to say, I know what this needs in order to work, and that's a lot of fun. I really enjoy figuring that out and doing that. What I dread the most is is in post, when the studio or the network come along and they note it and want to change things, and I've learned that I have to protect myself for notes, for time. It's hard to dread that, because I really think about I'm going to accomplish the part I love, how I protect it, because I'm not the be all end all. I don't have the final say. Mm-hmm. So I want to protect that thing. At the end of the day, if it doesn't work, if I do something and it works in my cut, but it doesn't work when it goes to air, nobody gets the blame but me, but the director, because you directed it, right? The audience doesn't have the luxury of knowing that you did it and it worked, but now it had to get cut down, or the studio decided we don't need that, we don't like these shots. And you're like, no, but that's the thing that sets it up. And you have that argument. And by the way, plenty of executives give fantastic notes. It's not a broad sort of like they're all bad, but I dread that. I dread, because I've had that experience where it just gets kind of unraveled. So those two things now for me sort of work hand in hand. I so enjoy the figuring it out, making sure somebody can feel something. And then it's, how do I protect that? How do I protect the script? Ultimately, that's my responsibility. Make sure I'm elevating it, protecting the writer, the showrunner. And it's a little bit different than when it's a movie where you do have more control, but I'm living in the TV world and I really enjoy it.
And, you know, you speak a lot about elevating the material. And I just want to know where did that come from for you, to that was, because it's so gracious and such a beautiful way to be as a creator, to be, you know, I want to elevate. I'm not trying to jam my ideas down your throat, or, you know, you're just being, you know, the best leader and team player.
Well, it's sort of self-serving, right? Because there's a number of different kinds of directors, filmmakers. My least favorite is when they're traffic cops. You know, they get the script and they do a totally fine job of executing the script. There's really nothing wrong with it. It's what's on the page, and I feel nothing. And that, to me, is, again, that's why I'm always like, how do I make it better? I don't want to just do this. I want to do this. I want to understand what it is that the script is trying to get to, whether it's an emotional beat, a scary beat, suspense, and what am I going to bring to it to elevate it? You know, you asked earlier in that action sequence, what did you bring to it? That's a tough one, because there was a couple of lines of action. I didn't really bring anything to it other than trying to make it work on a level where it served the purpose of the story. Where I really bring something special to a scene sometimes is what you would consider a more mundane scene, like a family dinner. And it's, you can shoot the family dinner and just say, okay, I need a wide shot. I need to know where everybody's sitting. I need to have Liz and Marcos talking to each other. I want a 2-shot of whoever's sitting next to Liz with Liz. And then we're going to cut it together. As opposed to, I look at it and say, that moment when Liz says that thing about her mom, I need to be pushing in on her. But it's not just her. Who is it landing on? Who's the person in the script that it means something to? What does that camera move look like? Is there a reveal? Do I come off of them fidgeting their hand? Things that are not in the script or not on paper, that I know visually. Like I said earlier, you turn the sound off and you're like, I can see what's going on here. She's talking and that guy's not saying anything, but it's landing on him, and it means something to him. And that is purely because of how the shots are designed, not because you're cutting to them, because you can cut to anybody listening to anything. And you can do that with music. There's plenty of ways to cheat that. And we find ourselves doing it as a producer director. When I get footage that I didn't shoot and something isn't landing, you know, I'm using music, I'm doing anything I can to get that out of it. But that's what I mean by elevating. That's what I mean by attacking it that way. I'm just always looking at the nuance of the scene and try to. Did you freeze?
You froze for a second. And
Okay.
you look at the nuance of the scene and you try what?
And that's what you try. That's where you try to elevate.
Yeah.
That's where you try to get to.
And you know, I've seen you do it in action, and it's really satisfying, not only to watch the scene, but I'm sure for the actors to really feel valued in even a simplistic, you know, dialogue scene.
Yeah. Look, actors are, I have tremendous respect for actors because they do something I can't do. They have to sort of put themselves out there and expose themselves in a way that for me is incredibly uncomfortable. I couldn't do that. Whether you want them to cry or scream or be frightened or whatever it calls for. I listen to actors. I hear what they come prepared. They usually come with an idea of some sort, and I think it's important to understand and see if there's something that they're bringing to it that you didn't think of, that you didn't imagine happening, or and whether it's a mannerism or a pause where you just didn't see the pause, but they're playing it out. I can always tell when an actor has prepared, not just memorized lines, but prepared. There's a big difference. One of the things I remember, so Nick Pileggi wrote Goodfellas and Casino, and I was just listening in on a conversation one time, and I heard, well, I don't want to say who, but there were actors who said a couple, who were talking about a scene that Nick wrote, and they started to improvise on it. And and Martin Scorsese is directing, and he's a guy who can say, no, it's this way. But watching him sort of take something that a great actor is bringing and then figure out how to weave it in because it made the difference is pretty genius. I remember I went, Nick and Nora went to the, they were being honored by the WGA and 100 greatest scripts of all time. And she had maybe When Harry Met Sally in there, and he had Goodfellas in there. And the clip they showed for Goodfellas was the scene at the, where Joe Pesci says to Ray Liotta, he's like, you think I'm funny? Funny how? Funny like a clown? That scene. And it's a clip that you see all the time. They showed the clip, Nick got up there, and he was like, it's amazing. I'm here at the WGA, and you show the one scene I didn't write. He wrote the scene, but that was Joe Pesci riffing, right? Taking something. And I think as a filmmaker, you sort of look at that and you go, that elevates it, that works, right? And you encourage those moments. TV is hard just because you don't have a lot of time. But if somebody wants to do, I usually let them get it out first. I want to see if they prepared and they're like, I want to try something. I don't care if it's complete, if it's 180 from where I was imagining it. It's better just you walk through the scene with them, you quickly do your rehearsal. And if they want to try something, I like to get it out first because I may not be understanding what they're trying to articulate to me. And then I see it and I'm like, oh, I see what you're doing. And yes, that's better. Or let's take a little part of that. So it's a real collaborative thing. And I enjoy that part. That's a lot of fun.
That is. Marcos, this has been so great. We are now out of time.
All right.
That was
amazing. Can't believe I talked for that long.
You were brilliant. And I'm so happy. Where can people, I don't know, do you do Instagram or something, or where can people?
I have an Instagram. It's not very film-like. I doodle and have kids. I'm not a great self-promoter in that way. A friend of mine was like, you got to do a website, and I started one, and I just kind of left it dangling. So I don't know.
That's okay. Watch his work. Watch his work. That'll be the best.
Well, thank you, Liz. This has been really fun. Really appreciate you guys having me on here.
Oh my God. And thank you, Marcos. And thank you, New York Film Academy, for presenting the 2020 series. And everyone stay safe, and we'll see you next week. Thank you. Bye, Marcos.
Bye.